Good morning, Colt Nation. I hope all you gentlemen are having a fabulous start to this Wednesday morning so far. Before we get started, I just want to remind you guys that the grading period did end last week. So hopefully you guys met with your teachers and you guys were able to go over any missing assignments you might have had and gotten all that taken away, because your grades should be posted, I believe, sometime this week. So hopefully that goes well. Remember, if you guys have any questions about your all's grades, make sure that you're reaching out to your teachers and having those conversations. You can also talk to your counselor. If you're in 6th grade, your counselor is Miss Bischoff. If you are in 7th grade, your counselor is Miss Brutcher. And if you're in 8th grade, your counselor is Miss Lewis. So with that being said, we're going to jump into today's lesson. The first thing that I do want to say is that our focus on today is going to be practicing positive self-talk. So last week, we went over helpful and unhelpful thoughts, and we talked about how to reframe unhelpful thoughts into helpful thoughts. So can you remember what those questions were that we can ask ourselves to help us reframe our thoughts? And remember, there were 3 of them. There were 3 questions that we can ask ourselves to reframe our thoughts. So take a second before I switch screens and show you. Remember, you did have the option 2 on your assignment last week to come up with your own reframing questions. So to go into a recap for last week, our reframing questions were: you can ask yourself, am I assuming something bad will happen? Because remember, sometimes we get on that hamster wheel cycle of constantly thinking that something bad is going to happen in all those possible scenarios. Maybe you have a presentation you have to do in front of all of your classmates, and you're nervous about public speaking, and so you're assuming all the bad things that can happen. Like your PowerPoint's not going to work, you're going to forget what you were going to say, you're going to maybe start to stutter, just anything. Maybe you get so nervous that you make yourself sick, just assuming all those really worst case scenarios in your head. So that's one reframing question. The next was, am I assuming the other person was being intentionally mean? And that was one that I know I can relate to, because I'm sensitive and I misinterpret things sometimes. Sometimes we think people are doing things intentionally when in reality, we're just kind of misunderstanding the situation. The last one was, what can I learn from this situation? And just having that mindset that everything is a learning opportunity. Even those unfortunate things that happen, what is it that I can learn from this? So those were the 3 different reframing questions that we went over last week. And like I said, today we're going to talk about positive self-talk, and we're going to learn how using positive self-talk can reframe our unhelpful thoughts. The first thing I want you to do, though, and this is just for a warm-up, I'm going to set my timer on my phone right now, but I'm going to come up with 60 seconds for you guys to come up with as many things that went wrong today or yesterday. So you have 60 seconds. If you don't want to write it down, count on your fingers the number of things that went wrong yesterday, and go. Thirty seconds left. 10 seconds left. All right. I'm going to pause that. So hopefully you guys did not run out of fingers, but I wanted you to keep track of how many negative things that you can think of that went wrong yesterday. Anything that went wrong yesterday, keep track of that total that you just counted. Now I'm going to set the timer again for another 60 seconds. So you're going to have the same amount of time, but this time I want you to think of everything that went right yesterday. Okay, so keep a track. You can write it down or you can use your fingers. You have 60 seconds, everything that went right yesterday, and go. Fifteen seconds. 5 seconds. And time. All right, so you guys just spent 1 minute going over everything that went wrong yesterday, and then you also spent 1 minute going over everything that went right yesterday. I want you guys to look at your list or compare, because you kept track of how many negatives you had versus how many positives. And I want you to add up how many things went right and how many things went wrong. So if you found it easier to come up with things that went wrong than yesterday, if you found more things that went wrong than right, then I kind of give a little thumbs up. And I want you to see that it's kind of interesting about what it is that we're going to learn today. But you're not alone. If your list of things that went wrong was longer than your list of things that were positive, I don't want you to feel discouraged by that, because we're going to learn why that is. So if your right list was longer, then congratulations, you're what they call a positive thinker. If your list of negatives was longer, you're doing exactly what your brain is wired to do. So let's take a moment. We're going to watch this video, and it is going to explain why it's easier for us to focus on the negatives. Quick little video.
Was it easier for you to come up with things that went wrong than things that went right? Me too. Turns out, this is a universal human behavior. In general, people focus more on the negative than the positive. Scientists even have a name for it. They call it negativity bias. But how exactly do they know about this bias? You can measure brain activity by putting what's called electrodes on the brain. Let's say you hook up electrodes to a bunch of people and you show them a series of pictures. The pictures aren't positive or negative. Then you show them a positive picture and you see how long it takes the brain to react. The brain will react, but it takes several seconds. If you show them a negative picture, the brain reacts immediately. And by the way, if you give people a choice, they'll continue looking at the negative picture longer. Have you ever noticed how someone can say lots of nice things to you, but if they say one mean thing, you end up thinking about the mean thing for hours or even days? This This is because people are hardwired for negativity. But why? Scientists think the negativity bias kept our ancestors alive. If we missed a threat, it could be fatal. But if we missed an opportunity, it wasn't a big deal. The problem is, the world we live in now is very different from the world our ancestors lived in. Now, scientists are finding that people who have a positivity bias live longer, are healthier, and even get paid more. So what exactly are we supposed to do with all of this? Here's the cool thing. You're in charge. You actually have a lot more power than you think. You can change your brain and make it more positive. So just be positive, right? It sounds easy, and you've probably heard it 1,000 times before, but now you know it's not a natural thing for humans to do. So it takes some hard work and real practice to make it into a habit that will turn your negativity bias into a positivity bias.
So I found that video very powerful the first time that I watched it, because it just kind of makes sense to me that negativity bias is the way that our brains are hardwired. And so we know that it can be difficult to pay attention to the positives sometimes, right? Because of the way that our brain is wired. But now that we know that it's natural to focus more on the negative than on the positives, we can actually begin to push ourselves to learn and practice focusing more on the positives. So this is something that we're going to have to train our brains to do, because just like the video said, the way that our brains are wired right now, if we're in that negativity bias, it's hardwired in there. But the good news is that we can change the way that we're thinking, right? We've had those conversations earlier on in this unit about those neural pathways and how we can keep practicing, just like we played rock, paper, scissors with our left hand versus our right hand. And we were talking about creating those neural pathways and how the more times that we practice them and with repetition, by repeating, it's going to become a habit. It's going to become second nature. It's going to be what comes natural. Just like how right now, for most of us, what's natural is that negativity bias. And maybe you don't have negativity bias and you're one of the, ones who is able to stay positive all the time. I would consider my husband one of the positive people. He's always positive and, looking at the bright side of things, whereas I'm kind of the opposite. I'm the hardwired negativity bias type. But it was interesting to watch that video and see that it doesn't mean that I'm a sad person. It's just the way that, how our brains are wired. So positive self-talk is a strategy that we can use to manage our emotions and interrupt the cycle that can lead to negative decisions. So when you think more positive thoughts, your feeling alarm is less likely to go off. And when you make positive self-talk a habit, you can actually rewire your brain to pay attention to the positives and have fewer unhelpful thoughts. So it ties into last week's with helpful versus unhelpful, because if we're looking at the positive side of things, then we're more likely to have helpful thoughts. And when we're having helpful thoughts, we're more likely going to have positive decisions as an outcome. Whereas if we're having unhelpful thoughts and we're having that negative self-talk, then we're more likely going to have an unhealthy decision, right? So let's keep looking. Practicing positive self-talk means thinking positive thoughts. So that's a simple definition. What is positive self-talk? It's those positive thoughts that we're thinking in our head. We're going to watch another video, and this one is of students describing how they use positive frame and positive self-talk during stressful situations. As you guys watch this video, I want you to notice how using these strategies make a big difference in their stressful situations. I'm going to go ahead and play this.
positive things to myself, it makes me feel less overwhelmed. It causes me less stress, and it makes me feel like I can handle whatever I'm stressed about.
Well, during school, it was this test. I mean, not a test, but a project that we had to present, and I just kept thinking about the positive stuff that what I would get from presenting it and being in front of all them people, like how I would grow out of being shy. When I presented, I was still kind of nervous, but I wasn't as nervous because I just kept thinking to myself only about the project and just focused only on that and wasn't worried about no one else.
I was super stressed out because right before coronavirus hit, they told us we were going to be closed for 6 weeks. I had a test I hadn't done yet. I'd only had it halfway done. I needed to finish, and I was getting super stressed out. But then I realized, like, I needed to take deep breaths and say to myself, you know what, Madison? He lets you take it home. You can just finish writing your essay, and then you can turn it back into him through email. And that made me feel a lot better. Sometimes talking to myself in my head in a positive way makes me feel a whole lot better about the situation.
A situation where I can remember saying positive things to myself is when my dad was making negative comments towards my mother. I was obviously stressed and angry, so I went into my room and I repeated these words to myself: "Sun's going down," based on the movie The Avengers, where the Hulk is redeemed, not angry anymore by hearing those words. So I applied that to myself and just sort of calmed myself down.
At the beginning of all of this, like the pandemic, I was like really stressed. I was like, I'm not gonna see my counselor, I'm not gonna see my school, I'm not gonna see anybody anymore. But then I took a positive side of it and a negative side of it. My negative side was online school. I'm really more of a classroom learner. I was like, oh, I can't learn online. Like, I'm not good at online school. I'm not good at technology. I need to be in the classroom. But then a positive side was, I'm like, okay, this pandemic is happening, but a lot of people are losing their jobs. A lot of people are dying, and I was like, I'm grateful to be living still.
Okay, so hopefully you were able to kind of relate to the students who just spoke. And they were sharing how it is that them using positive self-talk helps them through stressful situations. Just like there was the one girl who had forgotten her or didn't finish her assignment, and it was a test grade. The coronavirus hit. She knew she wasn't going to be able to finish the test the next day because they were going to be doing online learning. But instead of her, freaking out, she was able to do some positive self-talk and say, listen, I know that my teacher's going to understand this situation. He's going to let me finish it at home and email it to him, and instead of going on that negative spin. So let's kind of reflect on everything that we talked about. So practice noticing the positives. I really want that to be a priority for you this week. Practice noticing the positives, things that you're good at, things that went well today, and things that you're grateful for. If anybody out there is struggling with anxiety, I know that gratitude journals are something that's very powerful. No, it's not a diary. A gratitude journal is just where you write down things that you're grateful for. That's kind of training your brain to do exactly what we're talking about here. Training your brain to notice those positives, to think about those positives. Because remember, there's that relationship between positive thoughts, looking at the positive side of things, and making positive decisions. They're all in that cycle together. I know that we talked about that cycle last week about helpful thoughts leading into helpful decisions, positive decisions. So really this week, at least for today, I really want you just to focus in on what it is that you're good at, what went well and things you're grateful for. And if you guys can make that a priority each day, on maybe kind of at the end of the day, reflecting on things, what went well today? Yeah, there were probably things that went wrong and might have been not good to experience, but just being able to focus on the positives that did happen. So just because something bad did happen doesn't mean that your whole day was just a negative experience. And so not letting that one or a couple of incidences ruin that whole mode of thinking. Just really try to pinpoint some of the positive things that happened. And hopefully your brain will be wired to look positively. And I know that that's something that doesn't come easy for some of us, myself included. So since watching this video over the weekend, I've tried to be more mindful of thinking about the things that went well. Okay. So just to wrap up, I want you guys to think about one of the things that you listed for the warm-up that went wrong. So remember when I started my timer for 60 seconds and you guys had 60 seconds to think of things that went wrong the day before. I want you to pick out one of those things, and then I want you to identify what was the situation, what emotion you felt, and what specific positive self-talk you could have used. So something that went wrong. So yesterday for myself, my sister got married over the weekend, and we drove 6 hours in the car, and it was myself and my 2 girls, and it was just my family that was there. And it was for my sister's wedding. But anyways, when we were driving back, the girls, I've got 2 little girls, they're 3 and 6, and they were arguing in the back seat, and it just, was really distracting me. And it was putting me in a bad mood because they were arguing. I think we were all tired from just having a really busy weekend. And so I was feeling stressed out. I was feeling overwhelmed. I was feeling upset because they were arguing with each other. And instead, some specific positive self-talk that I could have done was, listen, I know that we've all had a long day or a long weekend, and we're all just kind of tired. They had already driven 6 hours the day before, so that's a lot to ask for a 3 and a 6-year-old. And just being mindful of that would have been something positive. Or just thinking about, I know that this is a hard drive, but I was able to see my sister get married, and it was great to see my dad. So another situation could be your grades. So the grading period is ending, right? So you guys are getting your grades soon. So maybe when you get your grades, that's something that is going to spark an emotion in you. And so that emotion, you can turn that into some positive self-talk by saying, like, I know that I could have done a little bit better, or I did the best that I could. I'm going to be more motivated next grading period. So just being able to be positive, look at the positives, look at the bright side of things, try not to get fixated on the negatives. At the end of the day, reflect back and really try to pull out those things that were positive, even if you have to think pretty hard. And maybe you have to be simplistic about it. It doesn't have to be anything real deep that was positive. So I look forward to meeting with you guys again. Before I let go of you guys, though, I do want to go over the assignment real quick. Can't believe I almost forgot about that one. So this is going to be in your Cult Connections classroom. Make sure that you do the one that's labeled positive self-talk. Has today's date, October 14th. The first thing you're going to do is you guys